Manager of Green Restoration Ireland. Oh, okay.
There you go.
I'll
Sorry.
start again. Yeah, no worries, no worries. So yes, I'm General Manager Green Restoration Ireland. Me and Paul go back a while now, so we set up in 2019, and we've been helping each other ever since. Him he was helping me more at the beginning, and now hopefully we're getting a bit more on an equal footing. But I suppose the thing here is that uh, in the UK, you're way ahead of what we're doing in Ireland. 55,000. What are you at now, Paul, Lisa, on the restoration front, over 50,000 hectares?
50,000.
Yeah. So lots of peatland restoration going on. And I suppose we're doing this webinar in the context of a current project, Peatlands for Prosperity. And just very quickly, I don't want to distract you from the speakers. They're going to tell you the interesting stuff. So with this project, we're looking at farmers in Ireland that have particularly cut over land, and we're looking at different aspects. So first of all, it's the possibility we now have a peatland standard for Ireland, which is out from the beginning of the year. So we have a chance to do what Paul and Lisa have been doing for a lot longer in terms of setting up carbon projects, which we're doing as part of this current program, and look at the possibility of getting carbon income. We are doing free farm surveys and recommendations in terms of the different crops, wether agriculture or polluted culture crops that can be grown there. And we have set up Ireland's first two on-farm polluted culture trials. So we're doing farm walks, and we're bringing over experts that we're in contact with in the UK and Europe. So Paul's already been over for the launch. So that was great. It was a great day, a great event. Lots of learnings were had. And this is just a continuation of the same process. So, because we're only really getting going in Ireland and then I suppose the other thing we want to show is, how is it going to look? Because we're just really starting on that journey in Ireland. I thought we'd bring in some people from the UK and tell us, what does it look like? We're getting stuck in, but obviously there's a lot more experience going to be shared with you guys today. So first up, I think we'll have Lisa. She's a field officer, so she's going to talk to us about how you set up a carbon project where you can get income from peatlands. And then Paul is the finance guy, so he's like the financial manager in the company. Well, no, you're fairly visible, Paul, but you're the key guy in terms of getting the income in to make sure that all of this stuff works. And of course, that's the bottom line here. So so that's it. I think if I can, I can get. I've done my talking. That's great. But we will have a Q&A at the end, and I might just kind of throw in a few questions, just if something isn't clear, maybe as the presentations are being made, rather than leave everything to the end. I think there's going to be lots of questions. It's going to be very interesting. And now I'll be quiet and I'll hand you over to Lisa.
Thank you. Right, well, I'll just share my screen. Ready? Right. Can everybody see this okay? Yep, good. Okay, look, so my name's Lisa Gill. I'm a field officer at North Pennines National Landscapes, working on the peatland programme. And my role has me involved in all aspects of peatland restoration. So from surveying and monitoring on the ground, creating restoration plans, and managing restoration projects through to completion. And part of that role also involves working very closely with the Peatland Code. North Pennines National Landscape's been working with the Peatland Code for around 10 years now. And today I thought I would just go through a presentation I created basically to introduce landowners to the Peatland Code. This is usually one step of many, and there's quite a lot to take in with it all. But yeah, so I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of how it all works, with a bit of a site example. We'll get started. So basically, the Peatland Code has been developed as a way of securing private funding for peatland restoration. And it's all about avoided emissions. So it's through restoration, avoiding further losses into the atmosphere. The reason that we introduced the Peatland Code to landowners is because it's the only scheme which is completely government backed, and it's a domestic voluntary scheme which has been developed by IUCN programme. We were also involved in some of the initial setting up of that and the data which has been provided towards it through the Pennine Peatlife project. To give buyer confidence, all of the methods are continually updated with the latest science. So that is something to be aware of if you're going to be getting involved with the Peatland Code. There are a lot of updates and multiple versions. So making sure that when you register the project, it's with the current version. But it also gives a little bit of confidence that you know the science is as up to date as it can be. It has completely independent validation. So we use either Soil Association or OFNG Organics, and they are independent validators that will come out to ensure the restoration is as you've said it's going to be and make sure that it's done to the best possible standards. And it also has ongoing monitoring throughout the duration of the project, depending on the length, between 30 to 100 years, to ensure that change is maintained, and more so just for buyer certainty that the carbon units that are being sold are real, quantifiable, additional and permanent. So eligibility. To be eligible for the Peatland Code, you must have either blanket bog, raised bog or fenland. Peat soils must be greater than 30 centimetres in depth. This was it was previously 50 centimetres, but this has been reduced just so we can exclude continuous areas of shallow peat. All of our sites we survey on a 100-metre grid, and it's at each cross-section where we'll take a peat depth. However, now when we come across a shallow peat area, we need to switch to a 50-metre grid. And if you get more than 3 consecutive points of shallow peat, those areas will be excluded from the project. So a little bit of extra work, but it's just that to make sure that there's areas of shallow peat aren't included. There needs to be no damage to existing peat since 2015. This is when the code was created, just to ensure that landowners haven't purposely went and damaged their peatland in order to claim carbon credits. Restoration must not be legally or contractually required, and it must not conflict with any other land management agreement. So if the landowner is being paid specifically to restore their peatlands, then they will not be eligible for the Peatland Code. There are a few little grey areas where, depending if it's capital works or just management payments, where it can be, but the general rule is if they're getting paid to restore the peatland, they won't be applicable for it. The project must be additional, so the landowner must be able to demonstrate carbon finance is required, and the duration needs to be a minimum of 30 years, so that's something else to consider. The amount of peat that is present on the site dictates how long the agreement can go into. So the more peat they've got, the longer the agreement. If you've got a metre's worth of peat depth for at least 75% of your points, you can go into the longer agreements. So all things to be aware of at that initial stage. Here's just a little example of some of the Peatland Code categories which the site will be broken into. You're actively eroding, where you've got a lot of your bare black stuff, and your drained categories where drains are being channeled and cut into the ground, and your hags and gullies are pretty straightforward. Those are the categories which you will definitely be able to get carbon credits from. We'll be able to go in, dam those areas, cover the bare peat with brash. You'll be able to see a visible change very quickly, and a much more straightforward compared to your modified areas. So where you've got these areas which are quite scatty in between, these areas can be much longer before you can claim credits on, and we're looking for vegetation change, which within these areas, upland areas often take much longer. So yeah, it can be less guaranteed that you're going to get your credit straight away from those kind of areas compared to your actively eroding and drained areas. So we act as project developers on Peatland Code projects, and there are a lot of steps included in doing that. Some of the initial ones are things you would do anyways when you come to restore a project, but there's a lot of additional paperwork, can be a lot of back and forth with landowners and the people on site. So it's just something to be aware of if you're going to be acting as project developers on a project, if you're going to charge for that, or if it's going to be something that's included. There's quite a bit involved. So basically we'll go out and survey the site on a 100-metre grid, as we would do with all of our restoration projects. But as I mentioned previously, if we come across shallow areas, we have that 50-metre grid overlaid ready, so then we can switch to a 50-metre grid, collecting the data that we need. You'd create a restoration plan and then a map of restoration interventions, including the areas of category change. This can be quite a time-consuming process. The Peatland Code has a very specific mapping technique that they like. all of our field staff, are very well trained in using GIS and mapping. However, we have a GIS specialist which has created an automated process where basically put in all of those shape files and it spits out the map that we need. It's something which has definitely streamlined the process for us, something which would previously take a long time to do, and just to make sure that all field staff are doing it in the same way and we all have the same output. As there are constant updates and sometimes even discrepancies between validators on how they like things to be done, knowing that the team is all doing it in exactly the same way just makes the process much more efficient. Then depending on what that mapping spits out, the sizes of those areas are going to be put into the emissions calculator. That's when we'll get our potential emissions savings through the restoration project, and these are the numbers which we'll give to landowners. This is often the first step in them knowing what the potential carbon savings and the potential earnings could be through going in the Peatland Code. So that's quite an important step to get that done. That's what we'll bring to the landowner, and they often make a decision from there. If we're going to go ahead and act as project developers, we then create an account on the IHS marketplace. This is where their carbon units will be for sale. And basically, this is what it's going to look like. There'll be the sites listed, whether it's a Peatland Code project or a Woodland Carbon Code project, at what stage it's at, the PIUs which are available, who the validator is, and the developer. And if you to click on that project, it gives you a little bit more information. Some of our landowners can be quite nervous about the information which is going to be out there and online. So this kind of often puts their mind at rest that, it's a very simplified map. There's not much information about the estate or the farm itself. It's more about the carbon and what's for sale. So we'll do all of that for them. There does need to be quite a bit of consultation involved. So again, this can be quite a time-consuming process. The advice from Peatland Code used to be a little bit more vague on this. So we have had previous issues where a landowner didn't want to disclose that they were going into the Peatland Code with graziers or commoners, which obviously could put us in a very difficult situation. But that's not the case now. It states that everybody that could be affected by the Peatland Code does need to be informed. So making sure that you have plenty of time to reach everybody that could be in any way affected by the project and the restoration needs to be taken into consideration. And all of the evidence as well needs to be sent off when validating the project. We then go ahead and do all the design documents, get quotes for the work, secure grant funding. The additionality calculator is a big spreadsheet which has the costs for the project duration. So whether it's a 30-year to 100-year project, all of the costs which could be involved, including validation fees, ongoing top-up works, everything is included in this. So the landowner has a really good understanding from the get-go of what's involved. And that's a good time to make clear what will be involved from yourselves. So if you're acting as project developer, making it clear which costs could be covered, say, through a grant, and which costs they need to cover themselves. We'll then do a risk assessment, and then all of this information will be sent off to a validator. So whether that be OFNG or Soil Association, all this information is sent off to them. There can be quite a bit of back and forth. So depending on updates and their interpretation sometimes of different things, there may be mapping discrepancies, form discrepancies, but that can take a bit of time in itself. So these are all things that will be involved just in registering the project and having a communications agreement if we're also keeping in control the IHS market account.
Just a couple of quick questions, Lisa, if that's all right. Yeah, just so you said that you had the process simplified, I think was, so is that an app that you're using when you're going out in the field that everyone has to?
No, so in terms
for the
of the
survey,
map,
for the survey work, sorry, I meant,
Oh, so for the survey work, so all of our sites are surveyed on a 100-meter grid. So we have the shape files and everything needed on we use trimbles when when we're out on site, so everything will be overlaid on there ready, so when we're out we're collecting all of the information that we need. It was more the automated processes when it comes to mapping that have been created, so all of those shape files, when we've played with them on GIS and got them all right, can be inputted into this automated process, and it'll then spit out the maps that we need, because otherwise that can all be done manually, but obviously it's just quite a time consuming process.
Sure. And then just, I suppose, for the uninitiated, you were talking about additionality, so that always raises lots of questions. Could you just give a quick description of what that's about?
Yeah, so it's basically like a huge spreadsheet. So we've got this big spreadsheet of everything that could be involved with the process. So that's all of the restoration costs, management costs, validator costs, top-up work. So when things go, restoration doesn't always work perfectly all time around. And peatland restoration is never a one-hit wonder. You know, it's something you go back to. All of the stone dams fill up with sediment. They might need topped up in 5 years' time. All of these things need to be equated and put into the duration of the project, just so the landowner is fully aware what is involved throughout it. So having that, I think, right at the beginning, so we can go through it all and what all of the potential costs are and the maintenance of this project is. It's just having that there, so it's all been agreed and everybody's on board and happy and knows what's involved.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is how it'll all work. So once you've done all those steps, we'll register the project. If everything's all you've done everything correctly, that project will be validated and assessed by the independent auditor. Now, at this stage, you can request your PIUs, or pending issuance units, to be issued. These are your carbon credits, but before the restoration has been done. So they're almost like a promise. They're worth less than a verified carbon unit. And also there is a risk involved if you sell them and the work doesn't work or doesn't go to plan. So I certainly wouldn't be selling all of your pending issued units at this stage, but you could sell a proportion if the landowner wanted to. Once that's all done, we will then implement the restoration plan. Within 1 year of restoration finishing or being complete, the site needs to be restoration validation. So that's where all of the documents we initially sent off need to go back to them. If there's any changes, so if things have gone wrong, something's changed, or you had a shortfall of something, all of these changes need to be made clear in the restoration validation and exactly why it's happened. You need to send away all the evidence, UAV imagery, all the pictures of the restoration, and then someone will come out to site, walk the site. You're never sure exactly where they're going to go or which bits they're going to check to make sure that restoration is done as we've said it's going to be done. And that needs to be within 3 years of that project validation as well. So you've got 3 years from that initial step, but 1 year post-restoration for them to come out and check. Now, sometimes this is a more guaranteed time to potentially sell some of those PIUs. Obviously, the restoration's been done. You know if it's been done to what standard. You could sell a proportion of them potentially to do some top-up work or whatever else you need, or you can wait for them to be verified. So it's then at year 5 when you have your first verification. So again, you'll have an assessment by an independent auditor who will come out on site, and this is when a proportion of your pending issuance units will be converted into peatland carbon units. So only peatland carbon units which companies can claim to offset their emissions. The previous ones are just a promise, and it's not until it's been verified that they can make that claim. And it's just at year 5 that you'll get a proportion of them. So not all of so initially you'll be told exactly how many PIUs you'll potentially get through restoration. Now, depending on how long that agreement is, 30 to 100 years, throughout that duration, the carbon units will be issued in installments after every verification. So at year 5, you'll get a proportion of them. Year 15, a proportion of them. So it is difficult for landowners to create an annual income through that, because you don't know how many you're going to get, and depending on the restoration each time. Say year 10 they come and something's happened. Say a grazier's drove all of his sheep into a certain area and it's bare again. It's ruined that piece of restoration. it means they won't get the units at that verification. However, it's not the end of the world. They can go back and restore that, and then the next verification they can get them. But it's just things to be aware of, and it's more reason for a landowner to maintain that work because it is going to be continually checked and verified. And here's just a little bit. Sorry,
Lisa. Just before you go, no. Just and again, just because I know what I'm looking at, but I just think the previous slide with that picture. Could you just, for those who might know, just kind of tell them what you're looking at? Because that's one of your more extreme cases of restoration, right?
Yes, this is just an aerial view of one of our restoration sites. So all those little bags are dumpy bags full of moss-rich nurse crop, which is spread over the bare peat. You can see the stone dams which have been put in place into the watercourses, and the little yellow Akoya rolls which have been put into the eroding shallower gullies there just to slow that flow of water. But that's just an aerial view of how much work goes into place when you think all of those dumpy bags, those stone dams have been helicoptered and flown into those areas. And that's just a little snippet of a very large restoration site.
Thanks.
Yeah, and here's just a bit of a simplified timeline. Well, I say simplified. It's not simple. It is complicated. There's a lot to take in with it, and there's a lot of work involved in it all. But yeah, just so it's clear, it's not until year 5 that a landowner will start to receive verified carbon units. So often one of the first questions a landowner will ask is how much are the carbon units worth? It can be really difficult to give a landowner any guarantee because there's no guarantee in what the carbon units are worth. They are market dependent, but really they're worth what someone's willing to pay for them. And the market isn't currently where we were hoping it would be at. You know, there was lots of talk of 100, 200 pounds a tonne. But at the moment, what we're seeing is generally a PIU, so your pending issuance units, could be anywhere between 15 to 25 pounds a tonne. And a carbon unit, so that's a verified carbon unit, can be anywhere between 25 to 40. Again, this can massively vary. An investor might be very happy to pay more or less. It's just, I think until those conversations start, you just don't know. It's very unknown. And also, just to make it clear as well, obviously the number of emissions reduced will also fluctuate with scientific knowledge. And the more we keep learning, that's why it's always changing and developing. But I think that's one of the key things to make landowners aware is we can't guarantee a price until discussions start. So project finance. So currently, the Peatland Code can be entirely funded through carbon finance or blended with public funding. And it currently allows up to 85% of public finance, which means the landowner needs to demonstrate that they have 15% private finance available. So the way we currently work it is all of the capital works will be paid for generally through a grant. So we'll go in, do all the restoration, and we'll find the funding for that. The 15% needs to be demonstrated that that's available for top-up works, the management of the site. It could even cover things like solicitor and agent fees, but that needs to ensure basically the long-term success of the project. And it also could come from selling those PIUs. So after the initial restoration's done, the certain areas which still require top-up, they sell a proportion of them. That can help to pay for further restoration works. It might not always be the case, so obviously that's how it's working right now, which I would say it's a pretty good deal for landowners. You know, they're going in, they're getting it all done for free. They just need to ensure the long-term success of that project. We do envision if the price of carbon was to massively increase, I very much doubt then that all of the restoration would be paid for through grants. I imagine landowners would have to pay more. But this is how it's currently working for us. So just some common questions here. So whoever owns the soil owns the carbon. If the land is sold, the Peatland Code agreement is sold with the land. Current SSI regulations will not be affected by the Peatland Code. The emissions calculator also allows a 20% buffer for unforeseen circumstances. So if there was a wildfire which spread through, there is a buffer integrated into that just for that little bit of extra security. The Peatland Code doesn't place any stipulations on how the land is managed, but obviously it's at your own detrimental effect if that restoration is affected by your management methods. So as I mentioned earlier, if the sheep were drove in or something happened which was down to your management, you're not going to get the units until you go back and fix it. And as well, as I said, companies can only claim on verified peatland carbon units. And so this is just a little example of what our automated process spits out. So when we go and do all of our shape files, we've collected all of the data and information that we need. The Peatland Code requires a very specific mapping technique where buffers are applied. So, for example, on your drainage gullies, there needs to be a 30 metre buffer applied, which just indicates the amount of drainage which be applied around those areas. And again, this process may need to be continually updated depending on what the current guidelines are. But this is basically an overview of what it'll spit out in your different categories. And these are the categories you'll put into your calculator and the areas of those to tell you how many emissions that you've saved or could potentially save through restoration work. And this is just a bit of an example of a site that we currently have going. So as you can see, this is an aerial view of our restoration work. The lighter areas are freshly spread moss-rich nurse crop on the bare peat. But as you can see, there is still areas of bare peat around here. So this was a site where we had a shortfall of moss-rich nurse crop. So when restoration validation comes about, we need to obviously say all of the things that have changed from the original restoration plan. Now, we were able to go back and find some private finance to then target all of these areas with plug plants, which we have since done. But because it hasn't been validated yet until people go on site, and obviously there's a change from the original plan, we don't know if that will be enough or if we'll still have to go back and find further brash for that. It's just something to be aware of as project developers. I think it's to either make it very clear with landowners that whose responsibility it is to go back and sort these areas, because nature restoration never works perfectly first time round. You know, things happen, things go wrong. Nature doesn't always play ball with us in the way that we want it to. So yeah, it's just something to be aware of where that responsibility lies. A little bit of potentially extra pressure when doing the restoration project. It's not just a case of, you know, going back and finding extra grant funding when it's in the scheme. I think just making it clear exactly where that responsibility lies is an important thing. So just as a little overview, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, been working with the Peatland Code for over 10 years. We currently have 7 sites registered, and we have lots of investors wanting to buy carbon units. So we do act as a broker and service as well when a landowner is happy to do so. I would say the difficulty is often finding landowners which are willing to sell. Lots of people just want to sit on it and hope, you know, carbon prices are going up, but there is more and more interest coming. And those deals are available. People are biting at the bit to buy carbon units. There's been a lot of teething issues, I'd say, with the Peatland Code, but we've helped different organisations work through. So we've delivered multiple workshops addressing these practicalities, especially for field staff. It's a bit of an unknown territory. We're all ecologists, you know, very comfortable with dealing with vegetation and restoration. And this is just a whole of a ball game dealing with finance. So we can offer bespoke training that can suit your needs. So yeah, if you do have any more queries or if there's further advice that you would like, please do get in touch. We're very happy to help if that's needed. But thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great, Lisa.
I think I'm going to pass you over to Paul now to tell you a bit more about our Peatland programme. Just stop sharing the screen.
Thank you, Lisa. What I would say, first of all, is we have a team of 8 field staff and 2 finance staff that make all this happen. And what they do is the most important bit of what this is all about. So my job is taking that product, I hate to use that term, but and then trying to connect that with the financing that's available. So let me just share my screen. Can you see it?
Not yet.
What now? No.
Afraid not.
There it is. How
Yep,
about that one?
it's coming. Yeah, that's
Sorry
good.
about that. Yes, so thank you, Doug, and thank you for the Green Restoration Ireland for allowing us to asking us to chat here. And as I said, the field staff stuff is really important, and often I get to speak about the finance stuff. But I just want to reiterate the stuff that we do at the field level is absolutely essential because it provides something that is robust. It is clear. It is complex, which has some challenges to it. It is long, and as Lisa alluded to, it's always changing. And I'll touch on these things, how those are sometimes not always, they're a challenge to some of these aspects of what we do. So just for those that don't know, North Pennines National Landscape, that's where we are. We are south of Hadrian's Wall and north of Yorkshire. We're that bit in England that often gets overlooked by people. And the North Pennines National Landscape, this area right here is 2,000 square kilometers of upland, in which half of it is deep peat. So it's actually the largest contiguous bog, blanket bog in England. So just a reminder, because I like to remind people, and it's something here I want to touch on, is why are peatlands important? And for biodiversity, they are important because they're intrinsically valuable for their biodiversity, for habitat. And blanket bog, which we have a lot of here, is very rare around the world, and the UK has a lot of it because we're wet and reasonably warm. But peatlands are important too for flooding. So peatlands, when I started this job some 20 years ago, that was the main driver to support this was flooding. Can peatlands act as natural flood management units? And yes, they can. The other thing is watercolor. So a lot of the water that comes out of our streams looks like whiskey. Doesn't taste like it, but it looks like it. And that's because it has really, really fine particulate bits of peat carbon floating in it called dissolved organic carbon. It stains the water. And that's important because it costs a lot of money to get that staining out at the treatment plants. So that's another driver. And the water supply. I mean, I know most of the people here are from around the Western Europe, let's say, on this webinar, but we have water shortages right now. There's a hosepipe ban in Yorkshire, south of us, and it hasn't rained very much at all. So the supply of the water is very important. The North Pennines is the source of 4 different rivers in northern England. So quite important when it comes to that, because you will agree, water is life. Sediment loading, this is kind of the big chunks of peat that wash into the system that can cause problems with habitat, aquatic habitat. It ends up in the harbors and has to be dredged out at great cost. So if you keep it intact, keep it up on the fells, that's where you want it to be. You can save money that way. The big one now, we'll talk about this, and Lisa has very well talked to you about carbon and Peatland Code, and I'll touch on that as well. Historic record, the peatlands in this area formed after the last ice age, so maybe 8,000 years ago the peat started forming, and things were captured in that. Things meaning pollen, people, all sorts of things that are trapped in that peat layer, and that's important consideration in case when you want to know about what else is happening in terms of previous environments, let's say. And then the economy. In this area, it's shot for grouse is a big driver in the North Pennines in Yorkshire. And it's also important for sheep farming. And it's also important for the work we do. We are an economic engine in rural areas. So peatland restoration is important unto itself, as is nature conservation in these protected areas. And then finally, I say all of the above because what happens is we can go into this reductionist mode and focus on one thing like carbon or flooding, or the only thing that doesn't fall apart is biodiversity. Biodiversity gives you everything else. If you get the biodiversity right, the flooding, the water color, the supply, all those things tend to, come with it. So I've been here so long now. I know if we can have a detailed discussion about carbon only, it starts to fall apart, the arguments around that. So I would, while we can talk about these individually, it's really important to realize that all of the above is why they're important and to focus on that. So a bit about North Pennines program. As I said, we've been here for since 2006. We turn 20 next year. In that time, we've restored or brought under restoration management about 52,000 hectares of peatlands. We've got about another, at current rate, 15 years to go. Those are just the sites that haven't been restored yet. Sites often require touch-ups as well. We've raised that kind of money, so that's come from all sorts of different pots. We restore, depends on the year, but I'll say 2,000 hectares a year, making us one of the larger restoration programs in the UK. As Lisa's touched on, UK Peatland Code, carbon credits is a big driver for the work we do now. This has evolved into the Great North Bog, which I'll touch on. But we also do a lot of private sector finance work, which is what I get involved with now. I'm not a finance person. My background's in forestry and environmental science, but I've kind of learned along the way how these things work. And we're also quite keen on looking at the socioeconomic benefits. We're about to develop a new project which will kind of tally up the benefits of the work we do, not just as a peatland program, but as a protected area. How much of a green engine are national landscapes or national parks in rural areas discussed? We don't know the numbers yet. So here's a site, and you can see way over here, look carefully, you can see Lisa and some of the team doing something down there. No, I'm just kidding, it's not really her. But that's the scale of how these things look. They're quite big, and that's just one bit of the site that you can actually see in a photo. So we have to go and spec that up, basically. We have to go and add up all the numbers, map it, and it's immensely time consuming, and we are very, very good at doing that. But that's what the before picture looks like. And you can see, you can imagine the flooding coming through here, the water, the sediment. Some of these gullies are, 8 feet tall, 12 feet tall. That's all that peat is washed away into the rivers. So it's a lot of work to do here, and that's what we specialize in. This is one of the sites from an oblique angle. You can see Lisa show it's the same site actually. You can see these big things here. The long ones, those are stone dams flown in by helicopters. These bags of varying colors are bags of the heather brash or sphagnum-rich nurse crop. I always forget, there's a new term for it now. And these linear, skinnier ones are coir rolls. And they all slow the flow. So the dams slow the flow. That's the first thing you have to do. And then you spread the brash and use other techniques to restore the site. Again, large areas. Unfortunately for us, or maybe Lisa likes it that way, we have to do all the work in the winter. So it's always cold. Everybody comes in wet every day. So it's really a difficult environment to work in. It's just the nature of the beast, really. We have to do the work in the winter. This is a site that's had, one of the things we've had over the years is these linear features here, we call grips. These are ditches cut into the peat to try and dry it. Because somebody in the 1950s thought, let's dry this stuff. Let's make it grassier. Let's make it more productive. We have 10,000 kilometers of these in the North Pennines. On the right here, you can see these little holes. This is where we come in and put peat plugs in there. So we put in, a lot of peat plugs over the past 20 years, and we've re-wet. We've blocked most of these grips. But it's an example of the scale we work at. All these things have carbon benefit. All these things have benefits to biodiversity and the other things I said. So we work across the spectrum when it comes to the type of restoration work we do. Here's a site that was damaged. You can see Lisa and the team would go in there, you'd add all these things up, you would exclude these things in a different category, and then you would apply the restoration work and spec it up, apply the restoration work, and then a few years later, you get the result, which looks a bit like that. Oh, missed it, that one. So you go from that, and then a few years later, you get that. So it works really well. You can see how the carbon benefit might be there. You can see the biodiversity benefit. If looking at biodiversity credits, you can see that area there is now more biodiverse, and you can see how the floods would slow and the water would be stored more. So it's a nice example. At a close-up level, we have to monitor everything to the nth degree. We use this technique. We use lots of techniques, but this is the kind of vegetation monitoring we do. And again, 3 years later, you get that kind of thing. So this works, it's proven, and it's been done over and over again. We always adjust. We always slightly change things as new technologies and new things pop up. So we're always doing that. So how do you convert this lovely shape that is sadly becoming a bit of peat? How do you convert peat and restoration into nature financing? And it's a dark art. It's something that's still emerging. It's something that is very interesting and exciting at the same time, a bit scary. So what we've done is we've kind of worked with the other peatland partners in the north of England. So these are and form the Great North Bog. You can see the Cumbria Wildlife Trust, Cumbria Peat Partnership, Lancashire Peat Partnership, Northumberland Peat Partnership, us, Moors for the Future in the south here, the Peak District, and the Yorkshire Peat Partnership. I want to name them all because they deserve to be named. We work very well together. And the idea of this was to basically present something really big that will attract finance. So something really big, because corporates want something big, government wants something big, philanthropists want something big. They want to invest hundreds of millions of pounds into this kind of thing. So we have the basic menu here to say, look, we've got this great big thing called the Great North Bog, 7,000 square kilometers, give or take, of upland, and quite a lot of it still needs to be restored. So we did this about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's attracted a lot of interest. Over the course of the history of the partners, we've restored these numbers, 160,000 hectares. The experience we have, we are very experienced. We share techniques, we share technology, we share financing quite often too, and kind of collaborate with things like helicopters, because why have a helicopter come twice when it can work in our patch and go to Yorkshire the next day, that kind of thing. We also are quite big on looking at the issues of, we spend most of that money, 130 million, most of it's gone into the local rural economy. There are not a lot of jobs in rural economies, there's farming and grouse shooting. So the idea of us being an economic driver, and we work to the local to global level, which is something that we're particularly proud of. And as I said, jobs and careers. So over the past 3 years for scale, the Great North Bog Partnership, or coalition, has restored 60,000 hectares, safeguarding or creating 105 jobs, and communicated with 68,000 people. So it's a nice example to show what landscape action looks like. It's not been easy to get here. It's taken a long time. There's still lots of things we have to work out, but that's kind of where we have been for the past 5 years developing the Great North Bog. So in terms of interest from private sector, we thought we'd go out and ask the private sector, do you want to work? Do you want to buy carbon credits? Do you want to buy them with a gold standard? Restoration is done properly. People are paid well, that kind of thing. It's a gold standard carbon credit. Went out to the market and basically said, please apply or express an interest in working with us. So we got 15 expressions back from banks, from big multinational companies, et cetera, et cetera. Went through a year and a bit interview process because we found that we didn't quite know how this works and they didn't quite know how it works. And so we learned lots from that. It was an amazing experience, really. And I never thought as somebody with a master's degree in forestry, I'd be talking to international food companies about, their kind of drivers for financing green initiatives. So we have finance partners identified, and we have people in place now, organizations that want to buy carbon credits. We do diligence all these organizations to make sure that they fit our kind of ethical charter, let's say. And we now arrange purchases of carbon credits across the Great North Bog. How that works is sites developed by the staff. So Lisa, for example, the site you saw there was all blacked out because we have to protect the name of the landowner. She would come to me and say, I'm talking to estate X, and they're interested in a chat. So what we do is we sit down with them and we look at Lisa's numbers and we put the map up and we talk about what the art of the possible is. But before that, Lisa, we have to make sure landowners want to sell. And they often don't. And they don't because it's new. They don't because it's complicated, because it's long, because it's risky. And the market is still developing. There's a lot of talk about carbon markets, but it's still developing, the voluntary market, that is. But so the landowners ask if they want to buy carbon credits, and then we set the meeting up. For example, Lisa would bring a meeting, and we come together with the numbers, and we'd look at it and say, this is what's there, and make an offer based on what the finance person, that the finance organization wants to pay for them. The numbers Lisa has suggested are about right. I hear lots of things about 800 pounds a ton, 800 euros a ton, whatever. In my world, on the coal face of this, we're looking at anywhere from 30 to 40 for PCUs. Lisa has also alluded to PIUs aren't of any interest as such. They might be in the future, but the people we deal with aren't that interested. There's also a big issue about things like removals versus avoidances. Peatland credits are avoidances, not removals, and thus some corporates don't want to buy those. So that's a challenge that we're trying to resolve as well. So after the offer is made, is time is given to the landowner. This is an important point too, because we are not trying to sell this. We are just saying to them, this is a thing. We have to be very careful about offering financial advice to someone, because we're not financial advisors. We just say there's a thing here, the numbers might look like this, and they make the decision whether they want to sell or not, and whether they want to sell all of them or some of them, or that kind of thing. So it's a slow process, as is the Peatland Code assessment process. So if they agree, we would facilitate a carbon credit, a carbon contract with them. We don't get anything out of it as such. We may one day. It's Black Friday right now for carbon credits, and that it's mainly funded by the public, and we want to try and kickstart the market. So that may change, but right now our interest is biodiversity and getting restoration work done, not necessarily making a couple of bucks off of the carbon credits. So that may change, because it probably will change, but right now the market needs a bit of help to get it moving. So the current priorities are solve the carbon market barriers. The price is too low, 30 to 40 pounds a ton. There's not much in it there really for landowners to be that interested. If it went up to 800 euros a ton or whatever it is, great. But that's not where it is right now. So that's one of them. The complexity and longevity of these things, the risk where that lies, these things are being worked out, and we are having our first carbon contracts developed. We're also working to develop the CSR market and ESG, so that's corporate social responsibility markets, which is basically when a company wants to give some money to a good cause and they feel they need to do it. So that's still an important part of what we do, because these kind of investment vehicles haven't necessarily developed yet. We're also working with donation models. So when you buy something, you put a pound in, and that's actually working quite well. I tell you this because these things are going to help develop the market, I think, and would build trust in the market and what's out there. We're also looking at other financial instruments such as bonds. So we've had conversations with a few banks and interested people about, can we develop a bogged bond for UK and Ireland kind of thing. And then collaborative bids. The government likes big bids. They like us working together, which we do. And then the key thing is, and this is what I always say, is the work that Lisa and the team do and all the field staff do. If we haven't got a pipeline of sites, we don't have spec'd up sites with the permissions, it's all ready to go. We have nothing. We're just talking about it. So we have dozens of dozens of sites in the pipelines and various organizations coming through. So it's absolutely crucial, because we can't stop to wait for the market to catch up. We have to do the restoration work while we can and keep going. So there we go. That's my presentation, and I'll stop there. And I'm happy to take any questions. I think Doug will deal with those.
Yeah, thank you for that, Paul. That was great. Great overview of the whole process. How long have you been at that now, with getting the finance in?
Yeah, maybe since 2018-ish, around there.
Yeah, and it's kind of evolving as a bit of a movable feast, or it's kind of...
Yeah, I mean, and for the first, dozen years, grants, everything was grants. And every once in a while, you get a little bit of corporate money, but it was around 2018 that we just kind of getting calls from companies saying, can we help? We saw something online, we saw something in the newspaper. And yeah, so it's interesting because there's no rule book. Unlike applying for a grant, whether it's EU funding or in the UK, Heritage Lottery funding or whatever, where there's a process, this kind of working with corporates is very much, it's intuitive, it's organic, and it's different. It's not what, as conservationists, we're necessarily used to.
Yeah, brilliant. So I didn't see, yeah, we're a bit bare on the questions in the chat at the moment. So look, I mean, people are welcome to put them in, but please, if you have any questions, we're here. This is the purpose, really. So we had an excellent couple of presentations describing how it's a lot of how it's to be done, but there's the fine details. So please, if anyone has any queries, please come forward. Just can I kick off with one, just to get the ball rolling, hopefully, and we'll have a highly interactive Q&A session. Here in Ireland, as I said, we've only got the version 1 of the Peatland standard, Lisa, so we're way behind. I don't know what version you're on in the Peatland Code in the UK, so we're just kind of starting out. But it was informed by the UK Peatland Code and the developers of the UK Peatland Code, so hopefully we've jumped over a few of the hurdles that you guys had to iron out. So just in discussion with them and the projects that we're working on here, there seemed to be that the understanding was it's what's going to be needed to get things going is the €100 a ton. Does that make sense, or do you guys have a sense of where things? Because obviously it's been around for more than 10 years. there's been an issue selling things. You said people are sitting on it waiting for a higher price. Does that sound sensible? And when is that going to materialize? Sorry, I don't want you to put, I know you can't read crystal balls, but what's your sense of it?
Shall I start, Lisa? And you can jump in. Do you want to go?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I would love to be able to tell landowners when it's going to get to that price, but we just have no idea. I think a few years ago we really did think it would be there by now, didn't we, Paul? Prices would have jumped up, but there's just still so much uncertainty, and I think that is the risk for landowners. And I mean, that in any way, it is a good way to get into it, because once you've done the restoration, you've got your PIUs, you're sitting on that pot. It could go up, but it might not. And that's all we know at the moment. I think there's just, still so much uncertainty. Paul, I'm not sure if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think a lot because the price is low. So how much was silver worth 20 years ago or gold, right?
Mm.
So it's that basically. All right, I got carbon, the price is low. I think I got a good price for it, but if I wait. And then the other thing Lisa has talked about, and you've alluded to, Doug, is this because everything changes. There are additions, there are updates, there are new versions. And I know you've heard this, Doug, but it's my phone here. This is my nice Samsung phone. And Doug, you can buy this issue right now. You can buy this. Or if you wait next year, you can get Disney Plus on it for 2 years for free. And you're going to say, well, tell you what, I'll wait a year then. I'll wait till the new version comes out. And that's what's happening. And I know the powers that be will say, yes, but you can update that. But people don't want to update complicated contracts. And it's more money, and it's more fuss, and it's more paperwork, and it's more. So there's almost a paralysis of decision, really, because there's so many choices. Or, you can stack things, you can bundle things, you can stack and bundle things, you can add this, you can do that. And if you can't explain it to a landowner, a farmer, or a keeper, or whoever in 60 seconds, it's just, I've been at a meeting with the NFU, and they've said this, no, absolutely, it's way too complicated. So there's that, right? And how it's about time, it's about communication, it's about engagement. That being said, there are some people, early adopters, as you expect. But if the price was £100 a ton, I think Lisa's going to nod. I think we'd see a lot more people say, yes, please.
Yeah, very good.
We do have a
Fingers
few questions
crossed.
we have a few questions in chat, and I think this first one from Teresa, we've already kind of touched on a bit, but they ask, are people a bit cautious of getting involved in a new market? Are sales increasing or fairly static?
I would say there's definitely the interest from landowners. It's just, as we've mentioned, it is complicated. So if you're going to be project developing a site, you have to be aware as an organization, it takes time. So often we could start meetings a year before we actually come round to anything happening. It takes, especially if it's a large scale estate where there's multiple people involved, they all need to know about that, they all need to understand. So that was part of the reason why I created that the presentation, just as a bit of an overview and introduction, so they can go away, they can sit in it, they can take it home, delve into it a little bit more. But then there's always follow-up meetings, and there is a lot to take in with it, which is understandable. We're asking people to go into 30, 100-year agreement. There's a hell of a lot to take in with it. But I think the more they understand, the more interest there is there. I would say the interest, it's the same from in the last few years. People are interested. It's just that hesitancy over price. I think if there was a bit more certainty in the market, there would definitely be a lot more uptake.
And then we have another question here. I'm so sorry if I get these names wrong, but I believe it is Naruman. And they say, do you have any project that has been verified and have PCUs yet?
Yes, we've just had our first project which has been verified, and that one has been handed back. Well, actually, Paul, so you're dealing with one of the agreements, aren't you, with one of the ones which is under negotiation?
Yeah. So we do. They're very few and far between, because it takes a while for these things to happen. Lisa said we have 7 sites on there. Quite often we actually have more sites registered, but they went dormant basically. So a lot of these sites, landowners do it, but they don't go through with it because the opportunity passes. So what we're doing is proactively trying to, develop this across the Great North Bog and get more of these online. It's interesting because there's a massive supply in the ground. We know that because we see it. And we know there's quite a massive demand. Now, I've been told there's not a massive demand compared to what investor market might want, but we have corporates contacting us on a regular basis saying, can we buy, can we help, can we support? So there's a demand, but there's no supply on the market. There's too little supply on the market. And it's partly because it's complicated and all those things. So we hope to have more of these, coming through. And it feels like, I said this last year too, it feels like it's starting to pick up again, but you can't quite tell. I mean, we do know that there's more projects coming down the pipeline than we've had previously, and that means more opportunities to say to landowners, do you want to, do you want to sell carbon? Do you want to Peatland Code project? So it feels like it's changing a little bit. I'm hopeful it is.
Awesome. And we might have touched on this one a bit as well from the previous questions, but Georgia asks, do you find that a lot of landowners sell their PIUs up front, or do they hold out?
I would say most hold out for the carbon unit. So I think that is the biggest issue. It's having landowners which are open to selling. What we've generally found, if they're not, if right from the get-go, they're not interested in selling. Once the restoration's done, it's been validated, that's when we'll generally pass the project back to the landowner. It's only if they're wanting to go forward and, broker a deal with an investor that we would continue to manage that project. Because obviously there is a lot of work involved. Once we've made sure we've done that restoration as good as it can be, it'll be handed back over.
So, Patsy asks, how much carbon can be saved typically per hectare?
Oh, I think that's so site specific. Every site is so different. So again, depending on the level of degradation, the amount of flat bare peat, the amount of gullies, every site is completely different. Until you go and do those calculations and you've walked the site, you can see the state of it. I mean, it could be a site which just has a little bit, of the more modified section and a couple of drainage gullies. It could be all black bare peat, which, obviously is the unit difference is going to be enormous. So you can't, until you've been on the ground and you've seen the site and you see what's there, there is no way of giving an estimate of what it's worth.
I suppose that's for the whole project, Lisa, but I think it's per hectare. So I think, and then within the code, there's categories. So could you just give an indication of the range from the modified peatlands up to the bare peat, what the figures are for emissions?
Oh, I don't know them off the top of my head right now, but it's considerably more for your bare peat and your eroded areas compared to your modified areas.
I think, and again, maybe Paul, you might know, just from, because I've been looking at it as well. So I think it's about 2.5 to 23, 24 ton. I mean, so it's a big difference. That's the categories. Yeah.
What
so
we can do is
sorry.
We'll get the numbers and we'll send it to you, and then you can share it. But yeah. Each category has a number per hectare, and we can do that. Yeah.
That'd be helpful.
And just to add on in Ireland, it's pretty similar as well. But essentially, you go in, and I suppose you don't have so much of that going on in the Pennines, but we have a big issue here with the peat grassland, so that can be as high as 30 tons per hectare. So essentially, 2 to 30 tons, I think, is the range, depending on the condition of the peatland. And then also, as you were mentioning in your talk, Lisa, you have that pre-2015 clause, so you can't come in and because obviously you're in line for a lot more money if you have a destroyed peatland. Yeah. So you can't come in post that date, strip everything bare, and then say, give me 30 tons, please. So that's an important proviso. You don't have a perverse incentive.
Awesome. And then Katie asks, are you encouraging landowners to look at their carbon footprint first, i.e. to keep some back for themselves?
Are you going to write for that?
Yeah, I'll start really. So some landowners in this area own large amounts of land. Thus, that tends to mean they have money, let's say. And they often have a business because they do other things. So quite often grouse shooting is one of the things that they do. They might be they might be a manufacturer somewhere else. So quite often the insetting, the reason they want to keep their carbon, go through the process and keep it, is because they want to offset it against their other business carbon footprints. That happens quite a lot. So we don't encourage either way. We're not about encouraging either way. We just say, look, this is a thing. You might want to consider doing it. as part of the grant, the government is asking us to let you know about this, and this is how it works. If you want to do it, we can help you. If not, so be it. So we have to be very careful about how we encourage. We inform, and they make their decisions based on what they think is their best business decision.
Awesome. Thank you. Sandra asks, are you seeing any slowdown in landowner appetite for restoration now that the Nature for Climate Peatland grant scheme has come to an end?
I think I know, Sandra. Did you want to start, Lisa? Any thoughts on that one?
I wouldn't say there was a slowdown. I think the interest is definitely there. Most landowners that have got a really degraded peatland want to do something about it. A degraded peatland isn't good for anything. If anything, it's just added further difficulties for us, I think, as an organisation. Luckily, we have Paul who can go out and find private finance for us, but it just adds that extra layer of difficulty. I think landowners will always want to restore their peatland as long as the options are available to them.
Yeah, I think having a bear, you saw that one of the pictures I showed or what Lisa showed, that thing washing away. It's a reasonably simple sell to the landowner. Look, it's washing away all of your grass, all of your heather, everything is washing downstream. You might want to think about doing something. That was a much easier sell in the grip blocking days where we actually had to put in dams and they're worried about lakes being formed and becoming too wet. So I don't think there's necessarily a slowdown. I do think that perversely, some of the options for getting financing, carbon financing, are making landowners say, I want to wait now. The site that we agreed to do, I'm going to wait for a little bit. So they'll wait a little bit and see. So we've seen a few examples of that, but there is in my view, there's a lot more countryside stewardship projects, so government-funded projects coming out the pipeline that we bid for these jobs. We bid for the survey work, and we have to competitively bid and do the specification. That leads to more contract work or to more restoration work. That seems to be coming faster than it has in previous years. I don't know why, possibly because some schemes are ending, it's changing. So there's still a lot to do, and there's still a lot of action, I think.
Perfect. And then our next question is from Howard. Have you a standard method for creating a profile of erosion features / profiling a degraded bog area, i.e. for assessing the levels of rehabilitation required per location?
You read, Lisa?
I was just, was he asking if there was a standard method for doing all of this? Is that?
Yeah, so standard method for creating a profile of erosion features / profiling a degraded bog area, i.e. for assessing the levels of rehabilitation required per location.
I'm assuming that's just talking about the mapping of interventions and what we need to do, which, yeah, so we have a standard automated process, so all of our field staff are doing it in exactly the same way. So when we go out and we collect all of the data, everything's recorded in exactly all the field staff are recording it in exactly the same way. All of that data is then made into shape files, which are then inputted into an automated process which spits out the map that we need for the Peatland Code. So yeah, every site is mapped in exactly the same, and whether it's going into the Peatland Code or not, it's done in the same way because we found that way to be the most efficient.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I think those are all the questions we have. I wanted to take a moment and thank Paul and Lisa again for being with us today and sharing all this amazing information. Thank you so much. I wish I had a round of applause button. I should work on that. And thank you, Doug, as well. Just a quick reminder that we do have an Eventbrite with some upcoming events. The link to it I'll put here in chat. I should be able to put it here in chat. Let me see. Perfect. Feel free to follow us because we have a ton of events coming up over the next couple of months. Our next on-farm training in Ireland is going to be the 21st of August. And then we have our next webinar on the 28th of August. So we have that coming up. And if you want to stay connected, go ahead and scan our QR code. It takes you to our link tree. We have a bunch of great articles and resources about the work that we're doing. We'll also add some information about the North Pennines, and we'll also link this webinar when it's uploaded to our YouTube channel. We'll also send out a link to that webinar to everybody who registered for today's event. But thank you again, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you. And sorry, just one final note there, Kelly, if I may, just to
Of course.
come in on the tail ends. Just, is that okay, Lisa, Paul, if we, because obviously you got your contact information, is that all right if we share that with the people who've been on the webinar? And then I don't
Yes.
think quite everyone, we had a full house, but we didn't get everyone turn up, so they're going to be looking at the recorded version, I imagine. Is that okay to share your contact details with them?
Yep.
Yes, it is.
Perfect.
Brilliant.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone.